Hey, like, alongside Assassin's Creed, Far Cry is the series that is most associated with Ubisoft's vision of open-world gameplay. You know, we talk about it a lot. The cookie-cutter design, people think they don't innovate enough, they can be repetitive. It's often the biggest point of criticism for open-world games in general, but Ubisoft's games tend to get the worst of it because, they're very rigid. They adhere to the same old formula time and time again. We've seen all the complaints, and I don't even think they're all necessarily wrong. Yeah, these games can be formulaic, but then if it's fun, it's fun. Sometimes they hit, sometimes they don't. Sometimes you're in the mood for one, sometimes you're tired of them. For as much as people talk about these games doing the same old thing time and time again, I think one thing about the Far Cry series that's often kind of overlooked is just how weird the games can be, how they can get. You know, the entire trajectory of the series is pretty bizarre. The first game barely resembles the rest. The second game is weird, artistic, experimental, at least by major publisher standards. And the third game is where we kind of think the Far Cry formula really actually started, is also pretty bizarre with its kind of Alice in Wonderland theme and psychedelic undertones. So yeah, after Far Cry 3 ended up being a big hit, they went on to basically make the same game 3 more times, but between those games, they took the series into some strange new directions. The first being Far Cry 3 Blood Dragon, which is just a brilliant standalone expansion. It's fun. It's one of the first games to really start riding the wave of that 80s nostalgia by making a parody of action and sci-fi movies. Then later on, Far Cry 5 got its own spin-off with Far Cry New Dawn, a post-apocalyptic game that served as a sequel to the base game. It's a pretty bold move, taking a series generally set in the modern day and propelling it into like a Mad Max type future. That game was okay. Still, for as unusual as these weird spin-off Far Cry games are, they really don't hold a candle to 2016's Far Cry Primal. This often forgotten entry in the series is the biggest and most experimental game in the series, at least up to this point, at least when it comes to the setting. So sure, New Dawn is set a few decades after Far Cry 5, but Primal is set 10,000 years before the rest of the series. It's a historical setting not even the Assassin's Creed games would touch. They went full prehistoric with this game. It's a wild concept, but the game was met mostly with a shrug back when it launched. It got okay reviews, it sold all right, but it didn't make that big of a splash, which is such a shame because I remember doing the before you buy video for this game. Yes, I've been doing this that long. I really enjoyed this take. It's unique, it's a different one. We're gonna talk a lot about it. Cause the further we get away from this thing, the more I can't help but respect it. I mean, they really swung for the fences here. The entire concept behind this game is so bold for something coming out of a major AAA publisher at the time. I would say that you'd never see them make a game like this today, but they didn't really make games like this back in 2016 either. It was an anomaly then, and it remains an anomaly now, and I think that's kind of why it's special, and why I think looking back at it, time has really helped this one feel much better. It's a Far Cry game with no guns. That is a bold choice right there alone. And the game continues to make weird, kind of audience alienating decisions that seem to be almost intentionally off-putting in a way that I kind of appreciate. I mean, again, this is a AAA game where nobody speaks English. All the dialogue is spoken in this completely kind of invented proto-language based on what scholars believe the Proto-Indo-European language might have sounded like 10,000 years ago. That's a ballsy choice that adds a lot of authenticity to this experience. I mean, this is literally taking place during the Upper Paleolithic, a period that we only know so much about. Far Cry Primal is one of those games that's just fascinating to talk about. Look at it on screen here, man. I mean, it's this unusual direction to take a long-running series. And while it's not the lowest rate Far Cry game, according to something like Metacritic, that distinction goes to Far Cry New Dawn and Far Cry 6, which, Far Cry 6, New Dawn, I definitely agree. That game was rough. But this game, Far Cry Primal, is the 3rd lowest rated game in the series, and I'm not so sure that that's even warranted. It's a game with flaws, yeah, but it deserves more attention and respect because they took a big risk with this one and ended up making one of the strangest and most interesting games to ever come out of a long-running series like this. Is it flawed? Yeah, it's not a perfect game at all, but in the sea of Far Cry games that all feel a bit similar, this one just, you gotta respect it. It's set around 10,000 years ago, right after the last ice age. You play as a dude named Takar, who is actually voiced by Adam Jensen, Deus Ex voice actor Elias Tefexis. Now, after you are settling into the Oros Valley, set somewhere in Central Europe, your tribe was scattered, and it's up to you and your allies to find your lost buddies and take on two major enemy tribes. The Udam, a cannibalistic bunch of violent cavemen who live high up in the frigid mountains, and then a more advanced tribe, the Izila, that are like worshipping the sun. They have slaves and they set things on fire. They're crazy. So when you're not hashing it out with these enemy tribes and throwing spears at other cavemen, you're dealing with the dangerous wildlife of this valley. You're hunting creatures large and small to gather crafting materials to improve your equipment, like you do in these games, but you're also taming beasts to assist you in combat. Now, considering that the firearm wasn't invented for like another 11,000 years, give or take, your weapons consist of bows, melee weapons like clubs, and some anachronistic stuff like kind of bombs. The weapons you have access to are much more limited compared to the usual Far Cry roster of weapons, but you at least can bring in animals to assist you, and it really can even the odds. Animal taming is one of the best new features with this game. It's pretty satisfying to be able to like really unleash all these annoying animals you had to deal with in Far Cry 3 and 4 onto your enemies. Now, one unique aspect of the game is just how non-linear it is. Yes, for a Far Cry game. But look at it, the story is pretty thin, so your primary goal is just to expand, assist your growing tribe, and then eventually deal with your enemies. But you can take that on in any order. That means that the game has no real quote-unquote final boss, so whatever tribe you deign to fight last ends up being the game's final encounter, and then that's it. There's no like additional side content or post content. Once both enemy tribe leaders are dead, then the game is over. It's a refreshing change of pace in an open world game to just let you progress how you want. It's not the first game to do it, but it's cool in this Far Cry situation. Depending on the tribe you go for first, you'll unlock new tools to assist you, provided by your main contacts for taking out each of these factions. The story, again, is pretty straightforward and kind of refreshing for a Far Cry game. It doesn't even throw some last minute twist at you, it just goes. You kill whatever bad guy you decide to take on last, and the game ends. It does feel like there could have been a little bit more to wrap things up, so I can see why some reviews from the time called the story a bit dull, because yeah, there isn't much to it. The real meat of the game is in the exploration and the hunting and just soaking in the primeval ambiance. Visually, the game does a great job bringing our concept of a prehistoric world to life, like the ones you would read about as a kid in the history books or the story books. You have exotic, extinct animals all over the place, gigantic plant life that may have not have been 100% accurate to the location and time period the game is set, but hey, it's respectable that the game even tried to make it feel at least somewhat accurate. There was some real work done here to make the game's vision real. They even brought in a linguistic PhD to help put together the game's 3 main languages that I mentioned before. Primal plays it pretty straight too. Like there's the Easter egg here and there, and yeah, the existence of Hurky, who's just kind of Herc from Far Cry 4 and 5 transported to this prehistoric era, his southern accent and all. It's just one big joke. The rest of the game is no joke, and it takes itself pretty seriously. You won't see any dinosaurs in the game, as tempting as it probably would have been for the developers. They stuck to their guns, despite Primal not having any guns, and they created a surprisingly authentic game. They could have easily made this thing some goofy thing with completely off-the-wall anachronistic elements. You could have been riding dinosaurs or fighting prehistoric bamboo machine gun weapons. Like, look, that actually would have been kind of awesome, but I do respect that they didn't do that. They didn't jump the shark here. They committed. So the premise is great. The visuals still hold up, even 10 years later, and the game is kind of beautiful at times. But for everything it does to distinguish itself from the rest of the Far Cry series, Primal still just mostly manages to feel like another Far Cry game. And I think that's what makes it so fascinating, but also kind of a bummer, because it is so different. It commits to like languages you don't understand. A completely different time period, more non-linearity, no guns, and yet it still manages to feel formulaic like a Far Cry game. I think that's ultimately what hurt this game in terms of reviews and just fan response. It's built using the Far Cry 4 engine and plays almost identical to that game if you just took out all the guns and replaced them with a bow and arrow. The setting means that melee plays a more important role in the game than any other Far Cry, but they didn't really expand on that idea too much. Melee just basically works the same as in other Far Cry games, which means that you tap the stick to attack, and that's pretty much it. There are no like real authentic parries or like a hardcore block or quick steps or something, like all stuff that if this game was made today, it would 100% be in the game. That just means that you're mostly relying on a bow and arrow and the occasional bomb to deal with most enemies. There's also this owl that you can call in to attack enemies and scout out enemy bases, which I believe is one of the first times this feature was in a Ubisoft game. But in general, combat in Far Cry Primal is a lot more limited compared to the rest of the series. It's just a lot fewer options for players, like how they engage with enemies in the world. And while stealth remains pretty simple and viable, it can sometimes feel like Primal's gameplay is simply Far Cry 4 with a bunch of stuff taken out, with very little put back in to replace it. I mean, just look at the map. It's basically the same one as in Far Cry 4. This was a big deal kind of back when the games first came out, and a lot of people looked at that as like lazy copy pasting of content. But if you actually compare side by side like how the two games look in game, they are almost completely different. Yes, the general layout is the same, but Primal clearly has been heavily modified up to a point where you'd never know the games share a map unless you actually looked at them side by side. I don't think it's actually been confirmed by anyone on the dev team, like speculation maybe a little bit here, but it seems to be generally understood that Primal was originally going to be a standalone expansion for Far Cry 4 before getting expanded on and becoming its own full game. It's a game that definitely is much bigger than Blood Dragon, the last standalone expansion. Apparently, the reused map was meant to be an Easter egg and was supposed to take place in the same location as Far Cry 4. But then that was later changed for story reasons, so even though the map is the same and Far Cry 4 takes place in a small Himalayan nation, Primal is set somewhere in Central Europe, so the map reuse doesn't really line up. Well, it doesn't really matter much at all though, because the maps are at least very different when you're actually running around in them. So yeah, the game got a lot of flack for not actually being all that different from the rest of the series, and I think even at the time that was one of my main issues. It still felt a little bit too Far Cry, which if you were like me and at the time you had played every Far Cry game 100% right up until then, you wanted something else. This provided something else in terms of setting, story, atmosphere, and I love it for that. But on the gameplay side, it's a bit more mixed. Look, you can say that some survival games have a similar premise as this one, but in terms of production value, this is probably the best and most fully realized vision of prehistoric life in gaming. It's not the flashiest game, it doesn't tell the most compelling story, it doesn't even have the most innovative mechanics, like we kept saying, but what this game does have is atmosphere. It's cool. It's a game that's just fun to hang out and play in for a while, exploring the primeval wilderness with like a bow, a club, and a bloodthirsty wolf buddy at your side. That's awesome. Look, this may not be the best Far Cry game, but I definitely don't think it's the third worst. It's underrated. It's a weird, ambitious oddity, and I can't write it off. The developers behind this clearly had a real vision that kind of flew in the face of what people expected from a Far Cry game. Maybe even what Ubisoft wanted from a Far Cry game. And honestly, I kind of want to end this video on the hope that more franchises go a Primal route, you know? Do something weird. Finally pull the trigger and make an Assassin's Creed set during ancient aliens times. Make a Call of Duty game set during the 100 Years' War. Make a Battlefield game in World War I. Okay, well they did that. But like, look, just do interesting stuff with these long-running series instead of like rinse, repeat, you know? It doesn't always work, but when it does, we get this weird, fun oddity, Far Cry Primal. And the game industry just needs more oddball, creative, off-the-wall ideas now more than ever. Even if you gotta do it in the sandbox of an already existing thing, sometimes variety is the spice of life, man. But hey, today we wanted to talk about an underrated Far Cry game, and that is Far Cry Primal, for us personally. Was really excited to make this video, but I definitely want to know what you guys think, because even when I said this game was pretty decent back when it originally released, I got some flack. So let me know where you sit on this whole thing. Do you like Primal? Are you more of a Far Cry 4 guy? Do you just not like the franchise at all? Let's talk anything Far Cry down in the comments. If you like this video, and you like talking games with us every day, clicking the like button helps us out. We'd appreciate that. But, as always, thanks for watching, and we'll see you guys next time.